everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today is the second video in my Lost series and we're going to be talking about the character Kate Austen. So we're going to be therapizing Kate, talking about what I think she'd be like as a client and getting into her story, her key relationships and the different themes that I think would come up in our sessions. I'm also going to be talking about how Kate changes in the show, even outside of obviously having therapy, because this is completely hypothetical. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be going through all the characters in Lost. So if you want to see those, please subscribe and please follow me on Instagram as well. All the links are down below. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get started talking about Kate. I'm very excited because I'm a bit of a Kate apologist. I think a lot of people don't like Kate, is my understanding. Could be wrong. Just growing up watching the show, I remember people found Kate quite frustrating as a character. I think if you're somebody who watched Lost, who was more about the kind of mythology, the kind of mystery of the island, all of that side of things, rather than the drama and the characters and the love triangle and the romance, then Kate obviously isn't gonna 100% be your vibe. Whereas as a teenager watching the show, I was really invested in both. I was really invested obviously in the mystery of the island, but I ate up the love triangle. I didn't know if I wanted her to be with Sawyer or Jack. I'm actually wearing, let me show you properly. I'm wearing my Lost t-shirt today that says "Come on Freckles" because I thought it was appropriate for today's video. Yeah, I was really invested in Kate's storyline, the drama and the love triangle as well. So yeah, I'm a massive Kate fan. Obviously my name is Katie as well, which also helps. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about her today. So I'm going to start off talking about how I feel in general Kate would present as a client. To be honest, it would be a struggle to get Kate to come to the first session. I don't think Kate would commit. Kate runs away. She's always on the move. She has a fear of commitment, obviously, because of her past and the fact that she doesn't settle in one place at one time. So to get her to turn up to a session at the same day and time every single week would be really challenging. I think in this hypothetical scenario, I'd see Kate every now and then when she kind of felt like it. I feel like she would pop in. She'd be one of those clients that will email every now and then and was like, oh, I fancy a session talking about something that's happened. But she would not be a regular client at all. I also don't know what Kate I would get. So obviously we see in the flashbacks that she uses different names. She's very good at lying. She's very good at performing, putting on a mask and putting on a new identity. I actually don't know until she trusted me who I would be seeing in the therapy room, what that person would be like. Her personality could be really different to her true self. Her name could even be different, the details that she gives, because we see throughout the show that she's very good at coming up with a backstory for herself that isn't actually the truth. She is just a very good liar. So again, I don't know who I would be seeing, and Kate has trust issues, understandably. So it would take a really long time for her to be her true self with me. And I'm not sure that would even be able to happen unless she saw me regularly, which would also be quite difficult. So Kate's not really the therapy type. You know, I don't want to write somebody off completely. And obviously people can change, but in general, just based on the character in the show, I think she would really struggle with committing to therapy, and she would be very avoidant as well and wouldn't want to get attached to me and wouldn't want to get close. She wouldn't want to trust me in a way because that would mean having to be vulnerable. And we see that happen on the island. On the island, when she is actually forced to stay in a situation, she is making connections. She doesn't really know how to be, and she lies quite a lot. In season 1, she doesn't say that she is the fugitive on the plane. She lies to Jack a lot. She lies to all the different characters quite a lot, and it's because she is so used to that and she doesn't want people to be let in. That's how I think Kate would present. Next, I want to talk about what would come up. So if Kate did commit to therapy, what would I expect her to talk about? Now, that question in itself is a little bit silly in a way, because obviously I don't really expect my clients to talk about anything in particular, but there usually is like presenting topics, themes, situations. So again, just basing it on what I've seen in the show, this is what I would expect Kate to talk about in terms of her story. So definitely, if we stick to flashbacks first, definitely childhood. So it sounds like childhood for Kate was really difficult. She had what she thought was an abusive stepdad, not only to her, but also to her mum, primarily to her mum. So having to listen and watch and be in a household where domestic violence is going on is extremely traumatic for a child, and already plays a massive role in why Kate not only has trust issues, but cannot settle down and be in the same place at once, because growing up she always wanted to run away, she always wanted to escape that environment. She felt very unsafe in that environment, and the person that she thought was her dad did take her out and did teach her hunting. He was in the military. That's where she learned a lot of her survival skills, I guess, and skills for being on the run, and why she is quite tough. The interesting thing that happens with Kate's childhood is that she finds out at some point, and we're not sure when, I think when she's older, we find out that she realizes that Wayne, who is the abusive stepdad, is actually her real dad. And this causes Kate to have a massive identity crisis, because this person is really abusive, is a drunk, beats up her mum, and she's able to probably rationalize that of like, he's this monster that's come into our lives, he's not my dad, he's not a part of me. He also, when Kate is a bit older, looks at Kate in a suggestive way, which lightly implies that there might be other types of abuse happening, or at least just the threat of that situation. So this, again, really traumatizing, really difficult for somebody to live with, to process, especially when we see Kate say to Sawyer in an episode in season 2, the main issue with finding out that Wayne is her actual dad is that now she feels like she can like feel his DNA, his blood, the fact that he is a part of her, she is a part of him. There's that connection that she's not able to separate, and that leaves her feeling absolutely disgusted and kind of filled with self-loathing and filled with rage and anger as well. And that really is the trigger point for killing her stepdad, her actual dad. So she commits murder, and that really is the reason why. She says that it's because of the abuse, which I'm not saying it isn't part of it. She obviously watched him beat up her mother for years and years. But what I find really interesting is the trigger point for her to actually do it. Because I imagine she thought about doing it for a long time. Obviously, I don't know that, but I imagine so. But the trigger point is when she finds out that he is her actual dad. And I think it's because it disgusts her so much and fills her with so much rage. That's when she makes that decision to kill him. And then that's it. She takes out an insurance policy. She thinks she's really helped her mum out, and she runs away and she leaves everything behind, which is kind of what she always wanted anyway. And what I'm alluding to here is the selfishness of this act. I don't want to be too harsh, obviously, because he's a disgusting person and she was trying to rescue her mum. But really, as her mum says to her in season 3, in a season 3 flashback, she did this for herself. She did this because she wanted to get away. She wanted to kind of be on the run and live a life where she doesn't have to really be herself and not be in one place at one time, and obviously get rid of him as if he never existed. So that is really the motivations from her, not solely through the love that she has for her mum. And so of course that leads to the ultimate betrayal in her eyes, because her mum reports her, which she does not expect, because she does think that she's done something morally good to help her mum. And of course her mum doesn't agree, because she, for better or worse, loves Wayne. There's obviously just other ways to go about helping somebody in a domestic abusive situation rather than killing them. Although I totally sympathise with Kate's situation. It's just there are of course other routes to take, like reporting him to the police and things like that I don't think's ever mentioned. So what's really interesting and would be a key I think, line that would come up in our sessions is the one person that was supposed to care about me, supposed to love me, betrayed me. That's a line that stands out for me because she is really hurt and devastated and again angry that her mum does betray her from her perspective and rats her out and reports her and calls the police, and that's what leads to this life on the run and the marshals actually trying to get her. I think she would have always lived a life of different identities and being on the run, but she didn't think that her mum would actually, name her and specifically tell the police that it was her that committed the crime. That's a big part of Kate's trauma as well, a big part of her trust issues, because that is the one person that she loved really and thought loved her unconditionally, and that turned out not to be the case. So now she's kind of lost both parents, because the dad that she thought was her dad isn't her actual dad. Her real dad is, a monster that she hates and has now killed. And she's lost her mum, because her mum actually doesn't love her as much as she thought and completely betrayed her. So she's very on her own at this point. We do see Kate settle down at one point. There is an episode where we find out that Kate used to be married. And ironically, she marries a police officer, which is just kind of funny. But this is a really good example of Kate becoming a character. She becomes the kind of Stepford wife, just classic, really smiley, friendly, like butter wouldn't melt, taco night, does shopping, everything's quite simple, happy, normal. Nothing exciting's happening. It's just two people in love that get married and then they have a house together and they cook meals for each other. He goes to work, she stays at home, etc. And realistically, that is not Kate. There's part of her that wants that out of life. She's got a lot of love to give. She's quite a loving person. She does care about people. That kind of ends up being her downfall, actually, which is how she gets caught in the end and the reason why she's on the plane. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So it's not that she's cold or unloving. So there is a big part of her that wants to love, and I think she genuinely falls in love with this police officer, but she lets it go too far. I think she just wants a taste of the dream of like what life could be like if I'd chosen a different path. And the pregnancy test that ends up being negative really is a wake-up call. It almost like jolts her out of the reality of it, and she realizes that actually if she was pregnant, that means she would be stuck there forever, because she'd be pregnant and then she'd have the child and then they'd be raising the child, and that's years and years and years and years. And the reality of that is too much to bear. She ends up drugging her husband and leaving him and revealing in quite a cruel way like who she really is, and he's just completely shocked and dumbfounded and is finding everything out at once, not that her name isn't even her real name and that she's leaving him and all of that. Yeah, so I feel sorry for him, but it was never going to work out because Kate is a fugitive and she wasn't being herself. She just fundamentally was acting and playing a role and loving him in a genuine way, but not being her authentic self. So it's not a real relationship. Another interesting thing that we see throughout Kate's flashbacks is just her using her looks and her charm. For example, the bank robbery, we see that in kind of two ways. We see the fact that she's very good at manipulating the bank manager, because she's stunning. First of all, she's objectively, beautiful, and she is just very warm and smiley, and she's very good at being charming and putting that on. And this is where her and Sawyer have this in common, because they con people using their attractiveness. That's why they're probably able to be themselves with each other. I sound very Team Sawyer today. I actually prefer Kate with Jack, but I'll talk about the whole love triangle in a moment. But I do like Kate and Sawyer, and I think one of the things that I like about them is that they are just being 100% themselves. So it's just an interesting thing that I think would come up in the session. Now, obviously, I'm a woman. If I was a male therapist, that would be really interesting. I do think that Kate would, if I was a male therapist that was similar age to her, I think that she would, if say she had to, again, in this hypothetical scenario, she has to come to therapy, right? Which obviously I don't believe in somebody having to go or being forced to go. But she would probably in order to get me on side, use that. I imagine she would be quite flirty with a male therapist. She'd be very charming, very smiley, tell this lie of a story of her backstory and make the therapist not probe her or challenge her as much or ask questions that she doesn't want to answer. She would be able to kind of steer him in a different direction. I don't want to get into trouble here. Like, this isn't me saying that male therapists aren't super professional or that it would work at all. I'm just saying this is what I think Kate would try and do, because we see that so much in the flashbacks. Like, she's very good at getting men on side. And we see that on the island as well. I'm going to talk more about island stuff obviously later on after the flashbacks, but we see that massively on the island. Charlie, Saeed, Sawyer, Jack, she's very good at getting the men on side, which is just, I think, just an interesting thing to notice about her. So yeah, in the bank example, it's the bank manager and the guy that she's robbing with. She completely manipulates him as well. Another thing that I want to talk about is obviously her childhood friend, the man that she is herself with, really, that she, again, does love. He loves her, but he stayed in that town that they are from and lived the life that she didn't want to live. That relationship in that flashback is very telling of, like, Kate was always going to be somebody that, you know, whether she killed the dad or not, she was always going to be somebody that would have abandoned that place. And even though she loves this person and is that part of her that is drawn to that life and drawn to that life with him, she isn't capable of doing that. And he knows that as well, which is why I think he finds it a bit frustrating when she comes back, because he's getting like kind of pulled into it again, because he obviously does have strong feelings for her and has known her all his life. And ultimately that leads to his death, because he tries to help her, he tries to convince her to not run away, to turn herself in, and she's not having any of it. And it really tragically, he ends up losing his life, which the guilt of that she carries through, we see that on the island with the little toy plane, the lengths she goes to get that toy plane, again, both in flashbacks with the bank robbery and on the island in the briefcase. It's because it represents the guilt. And often people who are really guilty about something, they need something to use to self-punish, especially as Kate in a way isn't being punished in like the traditional sense. Like, she's still running away, she's not being caught for her original crime. There'll be a big part of her that wants to be caught for that. She doesn't feel guilty about Wayne. She feels guilty, the only crime that she's committed that she feels guilty about. She doesn't feel guilty about the bank robbery, other things. She only feels bad about the responsibility of getting that childhood friend killed. And that's why the plane is so significant, because she needs it in order to suffer, in a way, in order to obviously remember him. But it's a symbol of her pain and it's a symbol of her guilt. So I imagine that toy plane would be brought into the sessions actually, and would be a really good thing for us to talk about. And then the flashbacks kind of end obviously with her downfall, ironically being very kind and helpful to an older man. So we see throughout the flashbacks that she's very good at manipulating men her own age. Perhaps she's also getting tired of the life that she's leading in some way. Really what happens is that she lets her guard down a bit too much. She sort of trusts him, she feels for him, she cares for him. And in the end, he actually reports her as well, because he needs the reward. And she still saves his life because the car crashes when they're being chased. But her saving his life and her trusting him to begin with is what leads to her being caught, which is almost quite poetic, because it validates the reason why she's not been doing that the whole time, because the one time she did do that. And it's interesting that he's quite like a father figure to her as well, because that's definitely like a hole that she has. That's definitely a wound, is that she doesn't have that kind of parental figure anymore. He kind of fits that for a few days, lets her stay, looks after her, is able to tap into that vulnerability, and that's what leads her to be on the plane. So that's the flashbacks. They're the kind of themes and the parts of her story that I think would definitely come up in the sessions. On the island, then I'm not going to go into all 6 seasons of stuff that happens with Kate, obviously, but there's definitely a few things that I want to talk about. The first one being is Kate always wants to get involved. You'll notice in season 1 especially, but I think throughout the whole show, to be honest, every hike, every adventure, every life-threatening situation, Kate will be there. Kate will always volunteer and she'll always want to put her life at risk. And again, this is what she has in common with Sawyer, which is, in a way, she wants, I don't think it's quite the same as Sawyer's. I was about to say she wants to die, because that's what we find out about Sawyer, and obviously we'll wait until Sawyer's video, but Sawyer is always putting himself in dangerous situations because he doesn't really care what happens to him, and I do think Kate is similar to that. Don't necessarily think it's as extreme as what's going on with Sawyer. She doesn't hate herself as much as he hates himself, but she definitely doesn't like herself, and she's also trying to make amends, I think, as well. In her weird way, she always wants to be involved and wants to help because of the guilt that she's carrying and the fact that she doesn't feel like she's a good person. She's always putting herself out there to help. It's kind of for selfish reasons, to be honest. Not to say that she is selfish, but it's definitely motivated for her to almost shift something out of her system, shake something off, where she's carrying a darkness, she's carrying the weight of all the crimes, the stuff that she did, trauma as well from abuse, and just pain and suffering and grief as well. And what better way to distract yourself and to try and not have to think about it than just be constantly on a hike or constantly on an adventure or constantly, close to death. You're not going to be thinking about much else. So it's just really interesting thing about Kate is that she's always on the go. She can't sit still, which obviously is a reflection of her character anyway. Being on the island, I imagine, was quite tough in the literal sense of she can't physically leave, there's no rescue, she can't get off the island, and so she is having to settle in a way. And I think that her coping mechanism for that settling is to keep busy and to just do. Really clever writing of the show, really, with her character, that as we get to know her through the flashbacks, her behaviour on the island makes more and more sense. A really significant moment that I, of course, have to talk about is when she helps Claire give birth. This is when I'll probably start to get a little bit emotional because the scene is quite a significant scene. And if you've seen my Jack video, I get choked up when I talk about loss. So I'm surprised it's not happened yet already, to be honest. Claire, who goes into labour on the island, Kate stumbles across her and has no choice really but to help her give birth. And this ends up being, I don't think anyone knew in the moment how important this scene would be for Kate's character. This is so significant because this kind of changes everything in a way. We don't see it till much later, but this is the epitome of having to stay a bit more grounded because she forms a connection there, not only with Claire, but obviously with Aaron as well. And she's forced to do something where she is helping a family as well. She's helping a family form. Now, Kate's family is completely destroyed. She has no family. And her bringing Aaron into the world and obviously handing him to Claire is just this beautiful moment anyway, but it's a beautiful moment for Kate because it's the beginning of her reparenting herself. So from the trauma that she suffered with her mum's betrayal and losing both her father figures, she has a lot of pain, as I've said, and Aaron and Claire are the beginning of that healing journey. So I had to obviously comment on that. Another thing in terms of the island stuff is that she is a character who really wants to leave. This is what she has in common with Jack. Jack is obviously, as I said in my last video, laser focused in getting off the island, and Kate obviously is very much the same. The reason why it's interesting with Kate though is because, as Sawyer points out, she's going back to handcuffs. What life is she really going to be living when she comes back? Because obviously they'd be quite famous as well. It's interesting that she doesn't really care about that. For her, it's the being still and the being settled and the being close to people that is scarier. And in her mind, there's always an opportunity to escape. So yes, when they get rescued, there's a chance she's going back to handcuffs, but there's also a chance that she's able to get away and then she's leaving it all behind. So it's just a really interesting thing about Kate that she's willing, as the Marshal says, she's willing to do anything to get away. Moving on to the flash forwards then, so her life off the island. So this is where Kate probably changes the most because she becomes a mother. She becomes a mother to Aaron, and that's why that season 1 scene is so significant. So she's actually caring for somebody else. Kate doesn't care for other people, usually. She has care for others and she has love for others. But in terms of that, being grounded, taking care of somebody consistently, that is not part of Kate's life. So the fact that she has a house and a child and she's staying in the one place is a complete character switch. It is partly because she is able to not do any time for the crimes that she committed through being part of the Oceanic Six and Jack's kind of character testimony. She gets labelled as the hero, which she gets very uncomfortable with, which is also really interesting. The story is that Kate rescued everybody basically, or rescued the Oceanic Six, and that's what Jack is saying to get Kate obviously out of jail and to not have to do any time. And her response in that courtroom is really interesting because for someone that lies so much, she doesn't want Jack to lie that much, or she finds it really, really uncomfortable. And I think, again, this is all a reflection of how she's changing. She's changing because there's something, she's not comfortable with it as much anymore. She's not as comfortable with the lying. Jack obviously knows her really well at this point, knows her so well. They've, fallen in love basically, or definitely had, a really strong romantic connection at this point. I think it's quite moving in a way that she's like, not you. She doesn't say this, but you can tell in her eyes, she's like, I can't listen to this from you because you know of all people that that's not true, that I didn't do all of those things. So we're seeing this shift to being more authentic, being more loving, being more grounded, settling, becoming just a very normal mum. And it's through loving Aaron that she learns the meaning of unconditional love, because Kate has not experienced unconditional love her whole life. It's not happened. Her mum didn't love her unconditionally, or it certainly doesn't feel that way because of putting herself in a dangerous situation, obviously with Wayne and reporting her. And she probably did get love from who she thought was her dad, but I imagine he left when the mum got with Wayne. So she's not had that steady, consistent love, unconditional love from somebody at all. Now she gets to give that to Aaron, and she wants to cling on to it for dear life. I find Kate with Aaron a little bit disturbing in the intensity of it, in that she's like the grip that she has when it's not her child. And it's obviously a good thing, like somebody did need to take care of Aaron, and somebody needed to step up in that role. So this isn't me criticising Kate, but I just find it fascinating the way that she can't let go, and she puts him first. She breaks up with Jack. They get together and she breaks up with Jack because he starts to spiral, in his storyline, and she can't have that, as she says, around her son. And he's like, you're not even related to him, because obviously Jack actually is related to Aaron through Claire. So that's a really interesting thing that happens as well. Kate becomes very, very protective and borderline obsessive with this newfound unconditional love that she has to give and receive, because obviously a child naturally gives that, and Aaron sees her as mum. And then the final interesting thing that happens in terms of flash forwards then is she finally cannot live with the guilt. So with Claire, the fact that Claire is on the island, we don't know what's happened to Claire, the fact that Aaron isn't actually her son and they should be together, she can't live with that anymore. And so of all things, Kate agrees to go back to the island. She gives Aaron to his grandmother, Claire's mum, and decides to go back. Obviously, it's incredibly traumatic and difficult for Kate to do this. She's bawling her eyes out the whole time. It's incredibly upsetting for her. But what's interesting in terms of character development is Kate's used to dealing with guilt about things, and she usually handles it in her own way and her own coping mechanisms for a long time. Like, she's normally able to carry guilt. She's not able to with this. It's too much. It's way too much. And she loves Aaron too much as well. And she cares about the people that she's made this connection with. She cares about Claire. So that's, again, why that scene of her helping with the labour is so significant. Because unfortunately for Kate, when you care about people, you cannot be selfish. You have to do the right thing. And it's worth it, obviously, to help the right people and to do the right thing. But it's just hard for Kate. It's just really difficult for her to give him up and to leave him and to go back to find Claire and reunite them. But really significant in terms of how she changes massive difference. So what key relationships would Kate be talking about in the session? So obviously her mum, that relationship for sure. The dad that she thought was her dad, obviously. Wayne, it would be very difficult for her to speak about Wayne, but that would obviously come up. The childhood friend that she lost, maybe her ex-husband would come up as well, the guilt surrounding that. So I won't go into detail with those again, obviously. In terms of the island, she would obviously talk about Sawyer and Jack, so I want to touch on them. As I said, Sawyer is kind of a mirror image of Kate. They have a lot in common. He also represents the part of herself that she's always trying to run away from. So that's why they're kind of like hot and cold, and she's drawn to him but like doesn't want to be drawn to him. Whereas Jack represents who she deep down wants to be. Like, she wants to be good. She wants to feel good about herself. But Jack's also quite triggering because she doesn't feel good. She doesn't feel like she will have anything good. And it's really telling, I think, that scene when they have their first kiss, where she's like, I'm sorry I'm not as perfect as you. I'm sorry that I'm not as good. That's complete projection, obviously, in terms of how she feels about herself and how she sees Jack. Obviously, we know Jack isn't perfect, but because she sees him as this like morally perfect person, he makes her feel really bad about herself. Whereas she gets comfort from Sawyer because it's like, well, at least we're the same. It normalizes for her. But then Sawyer's also quite triggering for her because it's like, no, I don't want to be that. So the reason why there is a love triangle is because she's in a constant battle with herself, and it's a tug of war between the various people that she wants to be. But I was always Team Jack because, I don't know, I just liked them together. I just felt for the characters that it made more sense for Kate to be with Jack, and for two people like that would never normally meet to actually be the ones to get together. Whereas Sawyer's really important as part of Kate's story, but I don't know in terms of like getting together at the end if that made sense. But the real love story for Kate is Claire, 100%. That's why at the end of the show, who does she get on the plane with, holding hands with Claire to reunite her with Aaron and raise him together? So, and I obviously don't mean that in like an LGBTQ plus way. I mean, genuinely, I believe that a person's love story doesn't have to be romantic. Love comes in all sorts of different forms. And I do think that the main person she loved more than anyone is Aaron. And through that, Claire. And that was the main soulmate in a way, which is why very emotionally in the last episode, her flashes that she gets, her like main connection is helping Claire give birth again and seeing the original birth from season 1. And that's what helps her remember who she actually is. And I think that is so significant that it wasn't with Jack or with Sawyer or with anyone like that. It had to be with Claire and Aaron because they were the most important people in Kate's life. She also has a really good connection with Sun that I think is interesting because Sun also lies. Sun also isn't quite who she says she is. There's a lot of mystery around Sun, and I think they bond over that. They bond over two women who have struggled and have had to do things that they didn't want to do in order to survive, in order to protect people that they love as well. So I do find the Sun and Kate friendship really interesting as well. So how does Kate change in the show? I've touched on this a little bit already, and essentially she becomes less selfish, less self-motivated. She becomes more grounded. She doesn't want to run away and escape as much. She prioritizes the connections that she's made in her life, and she doesn't put her freedom first anymore. Her freedom was the most important thing. She wanted it for so long as a child that her freedom always came first, no matter what, no matter who she met, whether it was the guy that she fell in love with and got married to, the childhood friend that she obviously cared about, her mum, even people on the island. But what we saw was her freedom started to matter less when it came to Claire and Aaron, and that's why she comes back. Realistically, the island isn't freedom. Back in the real world, she didn't have to go to prison, so she was free, but she wasn't free internally. She wasn't free from the guilt. So the fact that she sacrifices all of that and does come back to an island that she doesn't know if she'll be able to leave ever again, because, you know, it was lucky that they got out in the first place, that speaks volumes as to what happened with Kate over the course of the show, that she made that choice. So she just does not put her freedom first anymore, and that is the biggest change. And the final question that I want to answer then is, what things would I focus on if I was Kate's therapist and I was supporting her? So definitely the theme of I will never have anything good. In that season 2 episode, what Kate did, you know, she is going through a really tough time, and she says, you know, that I'll never be good, that I'll never have anything good. And I think that would need a lot of exploring and healing and realizing that she isn't her dad. We're not a complete product of our parents. We are ourselves as well. Not to negate, it would be a process. It would be a lot of like processing the trauma from her childhood, listening to her, obviously, talk about things that she probably has never spoken about before, but then moving towards a direction of like what is bad and what is good, and who she is versus who her parents are, and kind of separating her from Wayne in particular. Obviously, we would probably look towards the crimes that she's committed and perhaps really dealing with the guilt that she feels, and not like condemning her for it, obviously, and not saying it and not completely letting her off the hook for it either, but certainly looking at the reasons why certain things happened, helping her process the guilt, helping her process any self-forgiveness that she might want to tap into, because obviously, especially in regards to the childhood friend that she accidentally got killed, things like that, you know, we'd probably look at like self-forgiveness for that. We'd look into the real reasons that she killed Wayne, you know, not just the abuse, but what he represents for her. So definitely digging deeper into the crimes that she's committed from a completely non-judgmental space. Obviously, criminals that have therapy, they probably expect to be judged massively, so there wouldn't be any judgment. There wouldn't be any opinions about the crimes that she's committed. It would be from that kind of neutral, holding the space and letting her talk about it. And finally, I would want to get to know the real Kate. I would want us to focus on who Kate actually is, because as I said, she has a complete identity crisis the moment she finds out that Wayne is her dad. She then, on the run, has so many different identities. I imagine over the years she's completely lost who she is. So we would definitely focus on that as well. I would want us to move towards her being comfortable enough and trusting me enough to be as authentic as possible, and tap into her childhood and who she was and what she liked and disliked before she found out that Wayne was her dad, because that seems like a switch that happened. And accepting all parts of her, accepting the parts of her that, you know, do you want to settle and do you want to ground and do love and cares about people and all of that, but also accepting the part of her that likes to keep busy, that likes to be on the move, that likes to escape, that doesn't like to settle. And it's okay to accept both parts of yourself. We often feel like we have to, it can be this tug of war, as I said, like her between Sawyer and Jack. And often it's about maybe both sides of yourself can be accepted, and maybe she hasn't received any acceptance or unconditional positive regard before until obviously Aaron. So I would support her with feeling that kind of unconditional acceptance in therapy. So there are all my thoughts about Kate Austen from Lost. I'm sure there was still loads of other things to talk about as well. I just didn't want to make this video crazy long. Please let me know what you think about Kate. Is she one of your favourite characters, least favourite characters? What did you think of her flashbacks and her story on the island? And do you agree, disagree? How do you think she changed across the show? What do you think she would be like in therapy? And yeah, please subscribe if you want to continue with this series. Please give this video a like as well if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Instagram and check out all the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to this point, I really appreciate it. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.